The association of fashion with vanity did not originate in the garments themselves, but in the judicial and social regimes that governed their production and consumption. What appears as frivolity is the sediment of law, labor, and hierarchy. To follow fashion's evolution is to trace the visible operations of history. Its shimmering surface is structured by power, shaped by the slow choreography of taste, restriction, and authorization. Fashion speaks in material form, yet its traces are preserved in ideology. What we call style is often the most legible articulation of an otherwise invisible negotiation between novelty and continuity, desire and discipline, freedom and order. Early regulation of dress and the rise of craft guilds organized clothing around the strict taxonomy of labor. Tailors' statutes in cities such as Paris and London specified who could cut, shape, or assemble garments and who could not. These rules set not only a set of techniques, but a hierarchy of touch. Tailoring bound to measurement and geometry was positioned as a masculine form of rational construction, an architectural practice of the body. Women, barred unless attached to a tailor by marriage, were relegated to ornamental labor. Embroidery and lace became aesthetic veneers that masked structural exclusion. In 1675, a royal edict formally incorporated female seamstresses into the Parisian guild structure. Yet this inclusion revealed more about exclusion than equality. Tailors retained the legal monopoly over women's formal dress, bodices, trained skirts, and any garment requiring whalebone or other stiff materials to be sewn directly into the cloth. Seamstresses were allowed to touch these materials, only insofar they constructed the looser draped gowns that skirted the boundaries of structural work. The engineered interiors of corsets, stays, and hoop skirts remained the guarded province of men. Tailors defended this jurisdiction by emphasizing the technical difficulty and even medical significance of well-boned corsetry, asserting that such garments demanded geometric rigor and rational skill. The gendering of labor was reinforced through ridicule. Writers of the period mocked men who made women's fashion, suggesting that they should don female attire themselves so that the metamorphosis might be complete. Sewing, Jean-Jacques Rousseau remarked in Emile, belonged to women and to cripples, a task unfit for the dignity of men. As a result, women were permitted and confined to the feminized margins of dress production, the ornamental and the ephemeral. Les marchands de mode, purveyors of trims, ribbons, plumes, and accessories, crafted the surfaces that gave women's fashion its reputation for frivolity and excess. Fashion became an unserious domain precisely because it was associated with the women who produced and consumed it. And so the division between construction and decoration thus emerged not from technique, but from a legal fiction that mapped hierarchy onto craft and linked structural authority to the masculine and ornament to femininity. And yet this asymmetry was reinforced through what J.C. Flugel termed as the Great Masculine Renunciation, the 18th and 19th century shift, in which men abandoned display in favor of austerity. The sober suit, derived from the tailor's geometry, became a moral emblem of rationality and restraint. Spectacle was feminized. To renounce fashion became a claim for moral and intellectual superiority. To participate in it was to inhabit the terrain of excess and display. La haute couture, often imagined as the pinnacle of artistry, inherited this split, even as it seemed to elevate women's work. The male couturier, Worth, Barret, Dior, reclaimed dressmaking by reasserting this structural paradigm. Worth professionalized it through rigid silhouettes. Barret briefly resisted structure through draping but reinscribed the designer's authority. Dior restored geometry with the architectural lines of the new look. Intuition was absorbed into design. Softness reorganized into form. The gender shifted, but the hierarchy between structure and ornament persisted. Industrialization did not erase these stigmas. It mechanized them. As the 19th century gave rise to the modern fashion system, the old guild divisions re-emerged under new terms. The tailor became the modern menswear designer, technical, discreet, aligned with rationality. Menswear solidified into the architecture of the everyday, standardized, almost invisible. Women's clothing became the theater of change, a spectacle for circulating fantasies of femininity. The economic system that thrives on novelty and obsolescence absorbed this inherited moral order. The stability of menswear versus the volatility of women's dress was not a capitalist invention, but a legacy of centuries of regulation and hierarchy. These stories shape the philosophical lens through which fashion is judged. Michel Foucault noted in The Order of Things that knowledge in Western modernity is structured around what can be seen and what can be said. Visibility has long been treated as less trustworthy than abstraction, logic, and discourse. Fashion occupies the visible, precisely the domain treated as suspect. Georg Simmel, writing at the dawn of the 20th century, understood fashion as a mechanism mediating individuality and conformity. But even this analysis situates it within a visual economy. To imitate a pattern is to participate in a system where meaning is negotiated through appearance. And because Western thought aligned intellect with abstraction, and the visible with superficiality, fashion was cast as an aesthetic of transience rather than a site of meaning. And Roland Barthes, seeking a theoretical vocabulary for fashion, translated it into semiotics. The fashion system reveals the anxiety beneath this attempt. The written garment, he said, is a complete system of meaning, distinct from the real garment. Fashion had to be regretted to be taken seriously. A move that exposes the epistemic tension at the heart of this study. The visual must pass through language to be recognized as thought. And so René Magritte's La trahison des images, the treachery of images, marks the crime scene of the visible. The image is not the object. This mirrors a persistent anxiety in Western thought that the visible cannot be trusted. Again, where appearance is always the first suspect, and it's always presumed guilty. The visible is permitted no authority of its own. It must be translated into discourse before it can be trusted. These frameworks reveal that the superficiality attributed to fashion, it is not an absence of depth, but the consequence of a cultural order that distrusts the visible and devaluates the feminine. The hierarchies that once separated the tailors from the seamstresses return as divisions between intellect and appearance, structure and ornament, discourse and display. Fashion's trivialization is a residue of centuries of legal, moral, and philosophical coding. Far from being superficial, fashion is the surface where culture negotiates its deepest contradictions. Hierarchy, gender, authority, and the politics of visibility. So perhaps fashion's guilt is not its attachment to appearance, but the revelation that we all depend on it. The visible is not a distraction from meaning, but it is its condition for possibility. Every surface carries the weight of judgment. Every contour becomes a site where power is read, contested, and enforced. What we dismiss as superficial is the very threshold where culture negotiates who may be seen, how, and on what terms. Anyways, that's it. I'm not saying anything more.